welcome to another episode of the Caged In Podcast, a weekly podcast where me, your host, Petropat Silvers, breaks down a Nicolas Cage film, sometimes with a guest, sometimes on my own. This week, however, is a little bit of a mix-up of things because it will be me on my own, just talking about the film in general, and then I will go over to an interview I did with the writer and an actor in this movie, Todd Farmer, who you may know wrote Jason X, a fantastic reimagining of the Friday the 13th franchise where he put Jason Voorhees in space. Not only did he put Jason Voorhees in space, but in Drive Angry, he ripped Nicolas Cage out of hell on a revenge mission. Something that you could only see done in a Nicolas Cage movie, and especially in this time in Nicolas Cage's career. This is obviously 2011, so this is just off of the back of Season of the Witch and Sorcerer's Apprentice, and he's got this bleached blonde hair, and this movie very much shows that blondes have more fun. And this is it's a movie that knows what it is. It very much wears its heart on its sleeve and lets you know that it is a B movie, and it has no pretenses to be anything else but a B movie, and I commend it for that. And I think, like, everybody knows, you can see in the performances, in Cage's performance, in just like the whole cast, this like fantastic breakout role for Amber Heard. She's just playing it as this kind of like gutter-mouthed, vulgar woman who is just fucking great. And it's like, it's violent, it's nasty, it's despicable, but all in those fun ways, and just very much was made to be a 3D movie as well. So this came out in 2011, which was that massive boom a lot of you would have remembered when Real D became like a massive thing. Like every movie was 3D this, 3D that, whether it's animated, but some adult content was made in the 3D realm, and this was one of them. And it's just fantastic to watch, and it's really fun. And I'm not just saying this because I've got Todd on the show. Like, I enjoyed this movie just for all the reasons I just stated, because it knows what it is, and it's this story of Milton Chandler, this man with no name character who just from the get-go, he's just out, he's about, he's doing his thing, and he's after Jonah King, this satanic cult leader played by Billy Burke. And we realise throughout the movie that when Milton's daughter was killed by him, he took her daughter to be a sacrifice for Satan, because Milton and his followers, not Milton, Jonah and his followers are very much this like satanic cult who think that they can bring about the Antichrist by sacrificing this soul, and Milton doesn't want any of that. But yeah, it very much plays in the ballpark as well. It's something that we see a lot later in Nicolas Cage's career in Mandy, something in the way of, it plays with that thing of masculinity, and we know this in this movie because Jonah has his genitals ripped off by Milton's daughter, which just really shows you, like, that for me just felt like a real big stab at the idea of just kind of what masculinity is, and kind of like the fragility of it, and just how pathetic men in power can be. And obviously this was filmed and written years and years ago, but it's something that we see in the world a lot, especially with like some of the world leaders that we have at the moment. But standout scenes for me in this, like one that just like jumps to the forefront of my mind anytime I think about it, is there is like a absolutely fucking crazy moment when we see Nicolas Cage having sex with this woman. She's riding him. He is fully dressed, and this is something that me and Todd will mention. Is he's fully dressed, and he's just like pumping away, and he has a shootout, and this shootout happens all the while whilst he's still having sex, and it's just bananas. It's crazy. To back up a moment, just kind of like give you the broad strokes of this plot. It is this A to B story, as I said, it's very much, it knows what it is. It just follows this simple plot of this revenge mission, but with a twist, because, well, no, not really a twist, because a lot of movies kind of have this trope as well. He is being seeked by the police. He is being seeked by the devil's own accountant, played by Billy Fickner, who is, again, fantastic, chewing the scenery every time he's on screen, and he's just having such fun with it, as much as Cage, as much as Amber Heard, as much as all the cast, even Todd Farmer himself, who pops up in this as Frank, Piper's ex-girlfriend, played by Amber Heard, and everybody is just balls to the wall. We get like amazing cameos in this. We get Todd Atkins from Halloween season of The Witch. He plays this kind of police commissioner, like chief, who, there's this great scene on a highway where like Cage is barreling down with Amber Heard in the car, and he's like, remember to aim for their tires. It's the way he says tires as well. It's the way that us British people probably go, tars. It's like tars. Yeah, he's saying aim for the tires, and he's like, when I say tars, I mean their heads. And it's just this like, I don't know. It's just really like, again, tongues firmly in the cheek throughout this whole movie. The way things play out, we get this amazing scene inside of a church when Milton kind of manages to infiltrate Jonah and his gang of fucking misfits, almost like a kind of Red State-esque like cult, I guess, very much like Waco style, just very much like, or Jim Jones drinking the Kool-Aid, that kind of cult. They would do anything for this deranged egomaniac lunatic that is Jonah King. He confronts them in a church, and he gets his eye shot out. Like one of the things with Milton is that he's indestructible. Like nothing can kill him, and like he's like the Terminator. He just gets up, he carries on, he gets shot, he goes, and there's nothing that's stopping him. This movie starts with hellfire and brimstone, and we don't really know what's going on, and then we get this scene of Cage like just fighting these guys, and it's brutal from the get-go. It's like it's just like visceral and gross, and you can see the moments. Like, unfortunately, like this time watching it, I saw it in the cinema when it came out in 3D, but this time you can see all the moments where like the 3D would have been just perfectly, like, as cheesy as 3D can be. It would have just been perfectly fun and fine to see it in that way. Just all the stuff, you gotta miss the things that are coming out of you, and they are very much whack. They are they are moments that, like, yeah, that was supposed to be in 3D. So like other moments in this film, there's like very bizarre moments. Like some of the interactions with these characters are just like off the wall crazy, and it just adds to the tone of the movie in a whole. There's this moment very early on where Milton's in a diner where Piper works, and this is where we're introduced to Piper, and she's very like upfront and gobby and just like doesn't take any shit. But it's her like colleague. Milton has this like odd exchange for her and just ends up like kissing her, and it's just like kind of like slightly like gross, but like at the same time it's weirdly like it's sexy. It's got this like sexy element to it. I don't mean that in like a core. I just mean like there's something about it. Just this kind of like B movie grindhouse. Like this is very much in the grindhouse thing before Tarantino, and like, or not even before, but just kind of like without that like knowing wink wink nudge nudge that Tarantino Rodriguez does. This is like this, you can tell this is set out to be a grindhouse movie, and you can tell like Cage knows it, and he's great in this. Like obviously a lot of these movies, like, and around this time, this is just after like the financial problems that Cage started going through, but it gave us a chance to see him in something like this. I know a lot of people look at this movie and might think like be turned off by it and be like, oh, he's jumped the shark. Like this movie jumps the shark from the first second, and like it knows it's doing it. So like I would massively recommend it. And like I've got to talk about one like a few other things. There's this thing called the God Killer gun in this. That's just this crazy old timey looking gun that Cage has, and he's like he looks like he's ripped it from the depths of hell, and it can it when it goes off, it fucking goes off, and we see the kind of full potential of it at the end when he kills Jonah King, and he makes a line halfway through the movie which is great about wanting to like drink beer from Jonah King's skull, and we see a payoff at the end when he eventually kills him, and he gets ripped into this interdimensional nothingness, and his like skull is cracked open, and there's just this fragment of skull left, a perfect dome shape, and Milton uses it to drink a beer, and it's like, yeah, by that moment, if you're not at home or wherever you're watching this and just like kind of like that, yeah, fuck yeah, then this movie isn't for you. I know this movie, like critically and even on the box office, didn't do too great. Like the budget for this was 50 million and it only grossed 28.9 million. But I think this is, and I say this in so many episodes of this podcast, a lot of these like fun ones and a lot of like the good stuff that Cage has done, people kind of discount because they see him as this joke, and I think it's a real shame. And I may even mention this in the interview later. But I'd really recommend this, and I'm being quite brief about what happens in it. But I don't know. I really want to get onto the interview with Todd. I feel like that's more of the shining thing. I don't have a regular guest for this one, and it's more of a shining beacon of this episode. Is the interview with Todd. But before I do that, obviously, I need to tell you about Anagram. And we're over to my friend at Thomas _W Hunter on Twitter, who provides me every week with an anagram, who I can kind of like see whether it gives me a little information about the movie that I've watched, and whether it rings true. And I think you know my opinion of this movie because I've already just said it's fun, it's silly, it knows what it's all about, and yeah. Drive Angry, this week's anagram, is very daring, and I'd go with that. This is daring. This is Cade kind of going out on a whim, and well, not a whim, but like, is this Cade doing something daring? And that it is knowingly schlocky and B-movie, and it's all the better for it. And it's daring in just how like how sexual it is, how violent it is, how just kind of gross it's willing to go, and just yeah, it to have your villain like known to like have his dick ripped off, just even that imagery, like to have your lead character have sex and then like have a shootout with it, and just people's limbs getting cut off, people like the main character gets his fucking eye blown out, and that is like a kind of centerpiece for this movie. Like cars are destroyed. Like a comparison with this movie, weirdly, it reminded me of the Blues Brothers, because it's kind of got this like man on a mission against the odds, and he's kind of got the police after him. He's kind of got all these different factions. And as it goes on, he's getting more and more people pissed off of him and trying to track him down. And yeah, it's very much in that vein, but just straight grindhouse, straight schlock, jock greatness. Like, and I know those terms can probably sound to a lot of people like, oh, turn them off, but like I would highly recommend this movie. I'm sure at a later date I will revisit this and do a kind of like full breakdown about it, but with this interview I just kind of want to let you guys hear that. And yeah, so I'll go on over to me and Todd talking. This is like a fragment of our conversation. Obviously, I did a full like kind of career retrospective with Todd, but at a later date, I'll release the whole thing. So enjoy this part of it, kind of focused on Cage and Drive Angry. You mentioned Patrick Lussier, who obviously directed a film I very much want to talk about, which is the Nicolas Cage starring Drive Angry, which you get a fantastic arse kicking in that movie. Is it always your choice to write yourself in, or is it just a perk of the job? Like,
it was just a fluke. I mean, it started on Jason X. In college, I did a bunch of theater.
Yeah.
And so then I think Sean asked me during Jason X, he said, "Do you want to play a part?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he was like, "You can play one of the grunts," because they're the military guys. And I was like, "Yeah." So I chose Dallas because he had the biggest role, and I'm a dick. So it seemed like the way to go. And so then years later, when Patrick and I did Bloody Valentine.
Yes.
And there was a role in that was a sex role, but it was also a lot of special effects involved. And though being around the business anytime at all, you know that those are the two hardest things to shoot. And the studio wanted to hire a local guy from Pennsylvania. And there's probably a billion great actors in Pennsylvania, but I was worried because I knew we were on a tight budget. It was 3D and it was kind of new 3D, and we didn't know how it was going to go. And so I was complaining about it, and Patrick said, "Yeah, I know. Would you do it?" And so that's how I ended up doing Bloody Valentine. And then when it came time to do Drive Angry, the character was basically an homage to Drive Angry's character. It was the same name. It was, he's still a dick. It's basically the same character, but he keeps dying and coming back. Spoiler.
So in regards to Drive Angry, what was the genesis of that? Because as an outlooker, like I had to like look it up and be like, this feels like it could be based on some kind of like graphic novel, but it's from your twisted mind, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was the old Grindhouse, Race with the Devil. It was those kind of movies that what we had done is we made this 3D movie, and it was a big success.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, what do we follow that with? What else could be filmed in 3D that would be cool? And we thought, well, what about a car movie? And so that's really where it started. The idea originally was Tom Atkins, and I didn't mean to wear the shirt on purpose, but yes, Tom Atkins and Betsy Rue, who was in Bloody Valentine. What we thought we would do is just make this little dirty movie for like $5 million for a very low budget grindhouse movie. And the idea was we thought My Bloody Valentine would be successful. And so 2 weeks before it came out, we pitched it to Lionsgate. And with the idea, we will make you the sequel that you want, but we want it on the side. When we're done, we'll go shoot this little movie called Drive Angry. And then the movie came out, was a huge success. Valentine came out, huge success. And they never called us. And so we ended up writing the script on our own. We went out with it, and it became a different monster at that point, especially when Cage got involved.
Yeah. So when did Cage come like on board? Was that something that was written into the script, or were there changes once he came on board?
There were changes when he came on board, but not. But like basically his changes, like he would be on set and he would make changes to his dialogue, that kind of change. We didn't rewrite the character or rename the character or do anything different. When we wrote it out of frustration because suddenly 3D had become this huge thing and we weren't getting any jobs because people were saying 3D was a fluke, but at the same time, everybody was suddenly doing it. And so we wrote this script, we had this idea, it was sort of High Plains Drifter, part road movie. And we wrote it, went out with it, and we got a lot of really good press on it. Like we had a lot of producers very interested, and we met with all these different producers. And we'd go in and we'd say, what do you want to do? And they would give us their notes, and then we'd go to the next producer, and we were about to make a decision. And then one of the agents called up and said, you got to meet with Mike DeLuca. Mike DeLuca had ran New Line back when I did Jason X. And so Mike DeLuca greenlit my very first movie. So we met with him, and it was like love at first sight. I mean, it was, he was quoting lines. We were like, what do you want to do with it? He said, well, what do you want to do? What notes do you have? Because everybody else had notes. And he was like, go shoot it. He was great. And so, when you have somebody like Mike DeLuca, he picks up the phone and calls Nicolas Cage, because they were doing something together. I can't remember what movie it was. They had just wrapped something. And so maybe it was Ghost Rider. I can't remember what Mike was on, but he called Nick, and Nick read until the part it wasn't a church at the time, but where he gets shot in the eye. And he called DeLuca and said, I'm in. He said, I've always wanted to get shot in an eye. I mean, that was his reasoning. I always wanted to get shot in the eye.
Yeah, I read somewhere that he had actually said that, like, he wanted that for Season of the Witch, and then obviously, like,
yeah, see, it seems to remember that. Yeah,
yeah, a fascinating guy, and that is an amazing reason to take a role. In that I've always wanted to be shot in the eye, and there's a whole host of other things that were written into the script that are just amazing to look at. This film, to me, it feels like it jumps the shark in the first 5 seconds and then carries on jumping the shark, all for the best throughout the movie. In regards to like the writing of it, were you just like, let's see how far we can push things in certain regards? Because it's bloody, it's like,
to some degree. I mean, we sort of bickered over the basic concept, because we first talked about Nick Cage escapes from prison because this cult has his granddaughter and killed his daughter and took his granddaughter. And I suggested, well, what if he's breaking out of hell? And Patrick was like, no, then you got to see him break out and you got to set it all up. And I was like, no, High Plains Drifter. And he was like, oh yeah, that's good. So that's what we wrote. We wrote High Plains Drifter so that at no point in the movie does anyone ever say he broke out of hell.
Yeah.
We just did that when they released the trailer. And I was just like, wow, guys, why would you? That's like putting Uber Jason on the. Oh wait, they did that too. But I mean, I used to joke, it's like putting the penis in the crying game on the poster. And it's just, why would you do that? And I mean, they did it. That's the only regret. Otherwise, I actually think it's a really good story. It didn't change very much. Like I said, him getting shot in the eye, we moved that into a church because the weather was going to be bad, and we just simply didn't have extra time. So we had to do some rewrites, on the ground. But I thought that was great. I still think it's one of my favorite experiences, because I've never been in a position where we had money to throw at a movie, but in this one we had nothing. And so we had to think around every obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
We rewrote when we had to rewrite. We weren't rewriting because we were getting stupid notes or anything like that. We wrote because we wanted to keep making the movie. And I think it made for a much better film. There are elements that seem cheaper than they should probably, and we didn't have any control over that. But other than, the whole Nick Cage being from hell thing being, put on the trailer and the poster, I really think it's I just think if you were watching the movie, everybody would have figured that out at different points. Yeah. And I think that would have been much more fun, but just me.
Well, you got obviously the wish that Tom Atkins is in the movie as well.
He is indeed.
He is fantastic.
He'll be in every movie that we do that he wants to be in.
Amazing. I've loved him ever since I saw him in Halloween 3, the much underappreciated Halloween 3.
Yeah. It is a favorite of mine.
So you mentioned, Ghost Rider. I very much look at this as kind of like a spiritual sequel to the Ghost Rider, and obviously with your sensibility, I almost fit, because I always look back to Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, and speaking to one of the directors of that, like thinking of what that could have been, obviously, given the kind of treatment that Drive Angry had of being hard R, and especially like Nicolas Cage is willing to go to those places. Like in Drive Angry, we get a scene, I don't think I've ever seen it before, of a gunfight whilst a man has sex
Yeah.
with a woman, which is just like, as a viewer, that's what I mean about the jumping the shark, and it's all for the best. I love
Yeah.
how just kind of disgusting and vulgar this film will be, and just like it's got its tongue very firmly in its cheek, and
Oh, very much so.
know
I mean,
know knows what it is, and that's a great thing to see in cinema. Like,
Patrick and I, at the time, I lived about 6 hours north of Los Angeles. So our sessions would be Google Chat. We would just be typing back and forth to each other. And every now and then one of us have a really great idea. And like the whole shooting Nick in the eye thing, that was I sent Patrick a chat saying I just had an idea. It may be stupid as hell, but I'm gonna try it. And so I wrote it, sent it to him, and he was like, I love it. Same thing happened when I was writing the shootout scene. He called me. He knew I was on that scene. He called me and he said, all he said was, they never stop fucking. I was like, I got to call you back. And I just said that because that changes everything. And then on set, the day, I think it was the day that we were shooting, Nick informed everyone, I'm not taking my clothes off. And we were like, what? The actress was like, what? And so he was like, this guy would not take his clothes off. He knows the fight's coming. He knows they're there. He's seen them. He's not going to put himself in that vulnerable situation. And I was like, because he wasn't doing it for selfish reasons. It's not like Nick Cage is afraid to take his clothes off. He loves taking his clothes off. It was story. It was character. And I was like, you know what? I can't argue that. That's a brilliant idea. So he did it.
It adds to the kind of surrealness of that scene as well. Like, obviously, his reasoning for the fights was coming, but as a viewer, it's just like, this is all the batshit that I want to see as like a kind of grindhouse movie. And so speaking of you acting in stuff, like does that change obviously in regards to writing? Are you on set a lot on the stuff that you write, like especially
With
this and Jason X? Were you kind of
Jason X? No, with Jason X, I was only there for the first week, and that was because I shot my scenes the first week, and then I left, and then later I came back to do some sort of rewrite, but I was cooped up in a hotel the whole time. But and I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you. What was the rest of the question?
Oh, just like with Drive Angry, were you on set for it? Because obviously you wrote that as well. Or, like you're in that and you wrote it. Like
on Drive Angry, Patrick wanted me to be on set,
amazing.
And so he specifically had to go to bat to get the producers to agree to have me on set. And I had to. It was one of those things where it was, I guess, sort of humiliating in that I was there, but I was everybody gets per diem when you're on set, which basically you get food money for the time that you're there. My food money was at a much lower rate. My hotel was a much lower rated hotel. They let me go, but it wasn't like I was treated like royalty. I was not staying with everybody else. I was still with the crew. It's just I wasn't. Normally the writer would be with the director and actors, and I wasn't. But I didn't care. I got along with the crew great, and so it bothered people around me more than it bothered me. I was just happy to be there. But it's certainly, I think it's certainly, if you get along with your director and you understand your role as a writer once the movie goes into production, because Patrick and I are writing partners and we're on that movie. But when we went into production, he's the director, he's the boss. And so it is my job not to argue with him, but to make sure his vision happens. And so I think a lot of people don't understand that. And Patrick's not one of those directors that'll go out maverick. So I trusted him, and that's what made our relationship work. But it's nice to be there because, like, Nick showed up day one, he knew every line of dialogue. And he immediately found me and said, look, I was thinking about, and he had a little script that's about this big. And he's like, I'm thinking about changing this. And what do you think about this? And I was just like, dude, you have to make it your own.
Yeah. And from obviously the perception Nicolas Cage has to like the outer world, obviously in the last 5 or 6 years, he's kind of become this like online meme. I don't think a lot of people realize these kind of like smaller stories like that. Like many story I've managed to like find out is that even to table reads, he will come, he will know the script like the back of his hand. He's not just
Oh yeah.
taking these roles for some
Mm-mm.
kind of like paycheck. Like the guy is in it, and he very much has like you see it in roles like Drive Angry, like even yeah, like the stuff he's picking now. Obviously, we've had like news this week that Nicolas Cage is going to play Joe Exotic in a
Mhm.
CBS like TV show,
Yeah.
and it's like he he like I yeah, I hate to think that people like write him off, and like it's amazing hearing that like he's there, he's willing to put it in. You can see it on screen, like
Mhm.
he plays the straight man in this, despite how bonkers everything is. He plays it fantastically well. And like,
Yeah.
was that how it was on the page? You obviously cited High Plains Drifter. Was it like was that a note that was given to him by you guys at all?
I mean, it was no, not really. I mean, it was in this everything that was in the script he kept. It's not like he
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
stuff, but he would I did the same thing when I was playing Frank. I mean, I wrote it, but I would be on set. I would in my head I'm speaking the lines and that didn't sound right. I would change lines. I mean, it's just I've never been a princess when it came to the script
yeah,
because when an actor comes in, this is stuff that's just coming out of my head. You have to make it your own.
yeah. Of course.
Um, with Amber, I mean, Patrick used to joke, Amber's just me with boobs, and and it's kind of true because it was just I wrote her kind of um, not gross, but she's foul.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
she talks dirty. She talks like a guy in a lot of ways, and but Amber came on and she just nailed it. She
Well, yeah.
just became that role.
It's very much like a breakout role for Amber Heard, like you saying.
Mhm.
Like I remember I worked in a movie theater at the time this came out, uh, a big multiplex. I saw it in
Yeah,
3D. It was again. It seems like touchstones in my life. 10 years old, Jason X. Saw the front cover.
that's great.
The burgeoning of 20, yeah, my early 20s. Drive Angry came out. I was like,
Yeah,
that's a big slice of me. So yeah, before I let you go, Todd, just wanted to. I always ask this. Obviously, I'm not looking for real dirt or anything like that. But Nicolas Cage is a man who is known for having a few stories that people have always have that Cage story. Do you have a Cage story of your own? I know a lot of them aren't very aren't able to share. Should I say?
it's no, I mean, there's nothing I can't share. It's interesting that going into this, we were a little nervous because of those stories, and
Yeah.
you never know which stories are true and which are blown out of proportion. You just don't know. And so but what happened was he had all of that tax stuff happen before he showed up.
Hmm.
So and he even joked about there's a scene when he's got a gun and he holds up some money in front of it, and he made the joke, these days I have to keep my money in sight, and you know, when he was he was just absolutely great. He's different. He is, and by different, I don't mean his personality is different. I mean the way he must live his life is different from the rest of us.
Oh
He
yeah.
can't he can't go to a Target. He can't go to a Walmart or you're in the UK, so
Yeah,
he
yeah, no,
can't
no.
go.
We've all ingested enough US like pop culture to know all those touch points. Don't worry.
But he can't go to Marks and Spencer's. Not going to happen because he'll get mobbed. But we did about midway through the shoot. We were shooting in Shreveport, Louisiana,
Hmm.
which is middle of nowhere, Louisiana, and it's there. They had a really nice restaurant, the nicest steakhouse you can go to. So it was Nick, DeLuca, Patrick, and myself go one night, and we were there we went in, we ordered a couple of drinks, we ordered our food, several different courses. I think maybe one course had shown up, and people would come up and they would ask for an autograph or, say, oh, I really like your movies. And it was pretty constant. I mean, we'd talk for maybe 2-3 minutes. Somebody'd walk up. He was always an absolute gentleman. He was sweet. He signed autographs. But the longer we were there and the drunker everyone got, suddenly the entitlement showed up. So they were like, hey, talk to my wife. And he'd shove a phone in Nick's. And then all of a sudden it was like the Beatles. We were just swarmed. It's like everyone else saw this happening and thought, oh, I'm going to get in there. And so he looked so unbelievably uncomfortable. He immediately stood up and he's like, okay, guys, well, that's it, right? So we'll just wrap this up. And the rest of us were all like, oh yeah, sure, absolutely. And so we took him out to the parking lot where his driver was waiting, and he left. And so we all stood there and said, well, let's go get the food to go. So I went back to my cheap ass hotel room with my food and Nick Cage's food, and I ate both.
Well, that's a fantastic story. So, yeah, before I let you go, one last thing. Do you have like what's coming up for you? Do you have any like writing projects you're working on or anything like that? Obviously, it's a hard time for everyone, and everything's kind of in limbo at the moment. But
the biggest thing for me right now, I mean, we finished Trick last year, just a small slasher film, and then I've got another, I guess you'd call it a monster movie that we're going to film in Ireland, Northern Ireland. And then there's a movie outside of my genre, a rock biopic that I'm working on. And then there's a true crime movie that we just closed everything on. The script's already written, which will shoot up Northern California. So there's 3 things that, I mean, it just depends on when everything opens back up. Now, for those 3 things that are moving forward, there are, of course, probably 24 things that are in different stages of development, because you have to write a billion things in order to get one thing made. But those are the 3 that are the furthest along. As soon as we're all well and not getting sick anymore.
Well, amazing. I look forward to obviously finding out what those projects are when they do surface. And I'm sure in the meantime, me and my listeners will be trying to guess who the rock biopic is of. Obviously, I imagine you can't really say, but
I would love to.
No worries. We will speculate, and then I'm sure if someone, when it is announced, someone will claim the victor. And
of course,
they will feel validated. Well, it's been fantastic talking to you, Todd. Thank you very much for your time. I'll let you get on with your day. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me in my tool shed.
No worries. Thank you for joining me in my just shed.
Perfect. All right. Take care. See ya.
There we go, guys. There was the interview with Todd Farmer. What an amazing guest. It shows you, actually, you won't hear how he got into the industry. As I said, this is just an edited down version of the interview. The full interview, I'm thinking of putting it up on my Patreon site so people can listen to it now, and at a later date I will just release it anyway onto the main page. But if you want early access to that, just go over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/cagedinpod, and you can find that. I'll probably put that in like one of the lowest tiers. I've got a load of interviews that I've recorded and stuff like that. I might just start putting them out over there before I kind of share them on the main page and stuff like that. Just a little something for guys who want to support the podcast and stuff like that. And you don't even have to support the podcast if you don't want to. If you just want to like chat to me on social media and stuff like that, you can find me at Instagram, at just my name, actually. It's just Petros Patsilivas _ on Instagram, and I'll throw that in the show notes, as well as Twitter and Facebook, which is at CagedInPod. And I'm always up for having a chat, or you can drop me an email, which is cagedinpod@gmail.com. And yeah, let's get cagey, let's get weird together. Let's just talk about like what you thought of Drive Angry, or what you think of any of the movies, or just what you think of Cage in general, good or bad. I don't mind. Like I've said many times on this podcast, I didn't like go into this as a Cage fan. Over time, I've kind of developed a respect for the guy. I'm not just like fanatical, like, oh, I love Nicolas Cage. It's just more of a thing of like, I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to entertain us, and I think a lot of the time that is what he does. So like, how can you knock the guy? And yeah, before I wrap this whole show up, I'd just like to ask you guys if you could leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That would be great. But instead of just a review, I want to do something a little bit different. I want you to kind of write what is your favourite Nicolas Cage movie and why in the review. Let's do it like that, and any of the best ones I'll read out on the podcast, kind of shout you guys out and stuff like that. I don't want to just read out like your reviews, because that feels a bit like gross and self-serving and be like, look how great I am. Whereas like, I'd like to know your kind of personal experiences, whether it's the first, whether it's your favourite, just if there's like a funny or interesting story around either of those, yeah, just throw it in that. And obviously the more people who leave reviews and like ratings and stuff like that, this can go out to more people, and obviously like that would be great for me. But like, I don't know if you enjoy it, I'm sure you would like to share it with other people, and if you do, yeah, please do share it, even if it's not in the digital realm, even if it's just saying to someone, hey, I think you would enjoy this podcast. That would be amazing. Just yeah, I like to feel validated, so rate and review. As always, guys, I've been Petros Patsilowis. You've been amazing, and we're all caged in right now. No matter like whether the kind of news out there is cloudy or misjudged, or we don't quite know what's going on. We are all caged in. So I extend my arms out to you as we're all caged in together. And just if you think like we like other, yeah, you think you've got it bad just being stuck at home, at least you're not ingesting every Nicolas Cage movie. Okay. Bye.